So that's what we're doing. I'm Magruder with Belfort Furniture. Belfort Furniture is a retail furniture company in near Dulles Airport. Sort of a single location, but a relatively large furniture store. We supply across the broad range of price points, and HD, got Caperton are some of our suppliers. We actually have over a dozen. BDI actually is also a supplier. We have over a dozen of the Sustainable Furnishings Council members who are suppliers, as well as sort of people beyond there. But we have a lot of connection to the consumer, and so one of our major sort of pushes is how do we get when you're presented with so many different options, and we aren't solely sourcing from the most green sources, but sort of traditional furniture suppliers out there. How do you sort of push the consumer towards making the decisions in this diverse marketplace? Because if it's not from us, they're going to be buying from someone. So anyway, that's sort of one of the things we're there. And so we're trying to engage with the Sustainable Furnishings Council around that, and really sort of pushing towards the consumer education piece and what we can do as retailers and working with our manufacturing partners.
And you're located around Dulles?
At Dulles, yeah, Dulles, Virginia.
So I will interrupt the conversation that is.
Yeah. So one of the things we've done working with Sustainable Furnishings Council and Karla and a number of our suppliers, I think it was 7, that we're going to put together in the Ronald Reagan building a display of furnishings from member organizations of the Sustainable Furnishings Council. So we have a sort of a dining room from Caperton Furniture Works. We actually also have a dining room from HDD that are two very different looks. So it's to try to show the diversity of sustainable furnishings. It's not we're not at the point where we're sort of using corn stalks and all those other things, but it's sort of like a more traditional side of manufacturing. But what are the different aspects? And so Von Bassett has a bedroom that's all locally sourced, and so we have a bedroom set up. Very modern sofa setting Vanguard furniture. We have one of Tom Felicia's sofa settings that we're setting up there. Surya and Murasan. Surya actually has some really innovative recycled content rugs and that they're working with that are really fun and beautiful, but also just great products and renewable resources. So putting together that whole space, and so hopefully that'll be August, September. We'll have that up, it's a very busy area, so a lot of people there's a lot of windows, and so just to sort of engage consumers around those ideas, what a range of furniture is available with at least some sustainable aspects to it.
Just to add to that, so I want to thank Matt for all the support on this. We're really excited about this project. We've been talking about consumer engagement, and the research seems to show that a lot of consumers are going to throw their hands if they're not sure. So we're really fortunate that we have this space. It's in the Ronald Reagan building, which government building in DC is the second largest behind the Pentagon. So it's a very large building, but it has a lot of public access. They have this public gallery. They were very gracious to partner with us in this project. So we'll have 60 days for the public to engage with this gallery and to really get a chance to kick the tires, so to speak, about what does sustainability look like and how can they sit in their own lives. And we'll also have a very vibrant social media campaign and education campaign going around those 60 days. So the idea is to start a conversation. In particular from the SFC side, also we'll be using a lot of the materials that SFC has developed over the years to educate consumers. So if you're walking the gallery space, you'll not only see these furnishings, but you'll see large posters that are that identify the Sustainable Furnishings Council and why this in the room is sustainable and how you might take what you before they go out.
Our sound is sort of going in and out in the boardroom, so those of you in the boardroom, please be sure you're facing forward as you speak. Thank you.
Or is it in the room?
So the way in the building, they have a very unique space, and it is glass front.
Okay.
So it's a very busy pedestrian crossroads. This building has a metro stop, and food court, all these kind of public spaces. And there's just a big glass wall, and all the furnishings are behind the wall. What's great about the building is that there are about 10,000 people who work in this building. And they're kind of trained, if you would, to come to this gallery. So the exhibit that was there, we were there earlier, was an exhibit that was kind of like Project Runway, with really elaborate dresses made of like cupcake tins. So people traditionally have gone there in the area where people go for lunch and breaks. And so it's just meant to be attractive. So we think that the way Matt and his team have designed the space will be compelling for people to pop in, and the building itself will be doing some promotion about the fact that the furniture is actually in place, why it's placed. And I will have to say that this is a case where government really worked for us. The administrator of the building, this is a pet passion of hers, this question of sustainability, and she's really given us the space that we couldn't get otherwise, because they believe in it and they're exploring how they can be more sustainable about the furnishing of the building. And so they're actually using this project to help educate the building for things that they might do later as far as placing furniture in this very large building.
And so, a lot of times in these exhibits, maybe why I'm saying that is to say that they can paint a zero, virtually zero VOC for that situation. But I don't know if there are even any walls or dividers or any such.
We can talk about it because there are walls.
We need to get that on there. We have products that are like not just VOC until you take them to the tinter, while a lot of companies are tinting things and then they're selling it zero VOC, but it's really not because the colors have VOCs in them. Ours are virtually zero, and our tints are virtually zero. So that would be a great thing to showcase and to offer and to support what you're speaking to.
What's the time frame on this?
It will begin August 1st, and it will end September 31st. And we'll make sure everyone in the room, if anyone else wants to talk about participation space or anything, please let me know. But we'll be talking a lot about that because it will be the first of several efforts that SFC will make around consumer education. And I think the thing that's really great here is that we're great partners in the building. So in addition to our own social media and social media of our companies, we're also going to have some TV coverage and some print coverage because of the connection between what we're doing. The building, just to give you a point of reference, also housed, EPA is housed in that building, the Commerce building is housed there. So there are groups that, that have interests that we have interest in, a lot of private companies who do a lot of work around sustainability. So they just turn out to be an all around, it just works.
Yeah.
And if you add the fact that it's a high traffic, high volume area, the building gets 1 million plus visitors a year, just not accounting people who work there every day.
Right.
So it's a very high traffic. So we're excited about that.
Yeah. One other question here.
I popped in at the last minute because I got so much messed up. I'm Amy Dorf. I'm with Wicked, and this is a leadership and networking organization. Susan Ingalls has been a networking in Burns at Chapman, so it's not just women's business. And I would like to participate in all this.
Are you just in this area?
We are international, actually. We have a lot of Canadian members
We did.
Yeah. Women in the home furnishing industry today.
Oh, okay.
Tomorrow.
I will tell you that I have been a WISIT member.
This year was our first year.
Yeah, how did it go?
I was happy for
Right.
our
The next hour's conversation will start in just about 5 minutes.
I'm so sorry. I'm sometimes a little sheltered because of my
First thing you saw, that's all over there. But that said, it was quality contracts that we made. Quantity was not obviously. On the other side, we're happy.
Okay, Karla and Patty, welcome to the conversation we are going to start in just a little while. And I'm going to tell our audience that might be viewing, we do have a viewing audience. We've got some people viewing us live now, and we've got some people who might be watching it on the YouTube channel. So we do have some viewing audience at the moment. I want to be sure this viewing audience knows that we are going to start our conversation with our textile experts in just a few minutes. The conversation about how and why to green your textile choices will begin at the top of the hour. And I'm going to start by giving an introduction to this series of conversations. And I'm going to start that introduction about 2 minutes from now. So we are going to continue to hang out in a holding pattern. I think we'll test the volume, though, Karla and Patty. Why don't you say something, Karla, and let's be sure it works.
I think that won't be a problem. Do you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. And Patty, let's be sure I can hear you.
Yeah, I don't have my speaker, unfortunately.
That's okay. You sound fine. Good. So let's just keep ourselves quiet for another minute or two, and then I'll give an introduction. I'll give the preamble and then the introduction, okay?
Lovely, thanks.
I want to welcome you all to this SFC Next conversation. SFC Next is a series of conversations that we at Sustainable Furnishings Council have put together to help furnishings companies think smarter about sustainability and to help consumers find the information and the products that they need to furnish their homes in a manner that is resource efficient and healthy. My name is Susan Ingalls. I direct Sustainable Furnishings Council. Sustainable Furnishings Council is a membership organization made up of companies that are involved in the home furnishings industry in various ways. So companies that supply materials such as fabrics, companies that manufacture products such as furniture, companies that sell furnishings in their stores, interior design firms that specify furnishings products, and importantly, our membership also includes international conservation organizations, including World Wildlife Fund, from whose headquarters in Washington, D.C., we are on air today. So I thank all of you for being with us for this conversation. I invite you to consider joining our organization. Membership in Sustainable Furnishings Council is open to any company that makes a commitment to sustainability, that has their own commitment to sustainability and to transparency and to continuous improvement. We, as an organization, make it our business to support companies in realizing their own commitment. So we provide a lot of guidance, we provide resources, we provide education, including what you will learn in this conversation. We provide marketing support for those companies that qualify for it. They use the member seal in all their marketing and advertising, and they are on the finder on our website, which is how consumers and professional buyers find them. When companies are implementing sufficient best practices for sustainability, we invite them to be recognized as exemplary at the bronze, silver, gold, or platinum level. So I invite you all to consider membership with us, and those of you who are not companies but rather individual consumers, I invite you to use the resources that our members provide. And I invite all of you to join in this hour's conversation. You can send your questions and your comments by Twitter using the hashtag SFCNext. You can also send questions and comments by Google Chat, and we will address those questions as before the end of the hour. Our conversation this hour is on the subject of textiles. We are talking about why and how to green your textile choices, what textiles are preferred and why, what distinguishes different kinds of fibers, organic fibers, natural fibers, regenerated fibers, and we'll talk about natural fibers and about synthetic fibers. We are very pleased to have with us as our speakers in this hour, Karla Magruder, who is an ambassador with the Textile Exchange and who is the president and founder of Fabrikology International, and Patty Grossman, who is a co-founder of O Ecotextiles. And O Ecotextiles is a founding member of Sustainable Furnishings Council. So we are pleased to have both of you. I'll tell a little bit, a couple of sentences more, and then you all can further introduce yourselves as I turn it over to you. Karla is a textile executive with global experience working throughout textile supply chain, from fibers to fabrics to finishes to finished products. So Karla is a wealth of information for responding to many of the questions that have come up in earlier conversations today, and I hope that you will engage with her. She is completely committed to all the principles and values that we support in our organization too. So thank you, Karla, for being here. And Patty too has this deep commitment to the values that we have at our organization. She has a background that is not so much in textiles. So part of what we'll learn from Patty is how she went from managing Cesar Chavez's tour of southern states in 1971 and leading a nonprofit bank some decades later to now running a textile company, because we know that's an interesting story. So I am going to turn it over to you now, Karla, and thank you.
Actually, I'd like to thank you, Susan, for inviting Textile Exchange here today, and myself, and I'm looking forward to the conversation with Susan and the people who are listening and sending in questions. A little bit of background on me. Fabrikology, I've been in the textile industry for a very long time. I founded Fabrikology as a company that develops and commercializes fabrics with a focus on sustainability. I've been fortunate to become a Textile Exchange ambassador. An ambassador at Textile Exchange is someone that comes in and is able to provide specific expertise to the organization. And also for me, it's partly because I'm based on the East Coast. Textile Exchange is a virtual organization in that we have people internationally all around the world. Textile Exchange has some similarities with the FSC. It's a member-based nonprofit organization, and its focus is specifically on textiles. It's dedicated to accelerating sustainable practices in the textile industry. TE envisions a textile industry that protects and restores the environment and enhances lives. We talk about creating meaningful change at Textile Exchange. Some of our main missions are to inform the market, to provide education, to connect the market, to bring the players together, to make that supply chain more transparent, similar to some of the things that you were talking about, Susan, and also to lead the market in the textile arena towards more sustainable products. So what we would like to talk about today is preferred fibers. And we actually, sometimes we move away from saying a sustainable textiles because truly there isn't any real sustainable textile. Every textile has some impact in the environment. So we use the terms preferred fibers, and we also use the term more sustainable fibers. And I think it's important to define what we mean by preferred fibers so that everybody's aware. And for us, a preferred fiber describes a choice made in selecting better ecologically and socially progressive options through consideration of impacts and organizational priorities. So in other words, you want to look at the impacts of a particular fiber, but you also want to look at your particular organization's priorities. If you're a company and you're using a significant amount of cottons, then a cotton product is going to be the most appropriate thing. If you're looking at synthetics and that's the bulk of then you're going to have to find a preferred fiber that's a synthetic fiber. And more sustainable is a very similar way to convey the same message, that a fiber or a material or product has been selected based on a comparison to something else. So it's better than. It's something that you've looked at what those impacts are, and you've found ways that it improves the position from where you were before. Textile Exchange believes that every company needs to have what's called a preferred fiber strategy. So in other words, you need to plan out what your company's commitments are for a more sustainable textile business. While requiring, this is going to require that the company makes an investment in terms of time, resources to set the goals and accomplish the tasks that are required to do that. I think maybe it's a good time to let Patty talk a little bit about what she's doing, and then we can open this up and have it to be a conversation where we can go back and forth. Does that make sense? Oh, I think you have to unmute her, Susan.
Patty is unmuted now, I believe. No, Patty is muted again.
Oh, here I go. That was me.
There you go. Thank you, Patty.
Thanks, everybody. Well, I'm not going to go into anything about my background other than to say, you know, it wasn't in textiles. And it was a baptism by fire. My sister and I were looking for, well, I was specifically looking for a company to launch. And I wanted it to be a triple bottom line company. And my sister, who is the design person, I am the business person, discovered that she couldn't find a fabric to cover her sofa in the early 2000s that was that had any kind of green claim and was also high performance and beautiful. So we started looking into the textile business, and we were amazed at how the opportunity that we had, that we all had, of lightening our environmental footprint through our textile choices. And we found that, you know, the textile industry, just look, fabric is all around us. And the fabric industry uses just gargantuan amounts of three things: water, chemicals, and energy. So we wanted to somehow get our hands around what all the ecological issues, environmental issues were in fabric, and then come up with maybe a product that was gorgeous but green. Well, that was in 2003, even before the Global Organic Textile Standard had been published, and we had to come up with a framework to try to identify all the green aspects of fabric. So the framework we came up with was, what are all the issues involved in the following categories? Toxicity to the environment, toxicity to living things, carbon footprint, social and worker issues, water treatment, end of life. And if we tried to, we found that if we tried to figure out what all the ecological, environmental issues were under those categories, we had a pretty comprehensive view of both the fiber and the entire fabric production process. So we came up, we didn't choose just one fiber, but we do focus on the bast fiber family. And we just want people really to focus on their fabric choices, because through your fabric choices, you really can lighten your environmental footprint. If you...
So Patty, Patty, look up into your webcam and tell us what bast fiber is, and then continue.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, Susan. A bast fiber is a fiber. It's a plant where we get the fiber that's spun into yarn from other than the flower of the plant. Like cotton is the flower of the plant, and because it's easy to get to those fibers, by little buggies, we have to have pretty intense chemical inputs raising cotton. But with bast fiber fabrics, linen, hemp, nettle, and we're pretty loosey-goosey about what we call a bast fiber, bananas, pineapple, those fibers that are spun into yarn come from the stalk of the plant, and bugs aren't usually very interested in them. And they have a very nice ecological profile because they can be grown with fewer inputs than many other fibers. Plus, and this is the really important thing we think, in that framework categories, all those categories, we've really started focusing on carbon footprint as the one issue we want to, well, focus on. And we have found that almost any natural fiber is a better choice carbon footprint-wise than any synthetic fiber. So, there's lots and lots of detail about this that I'm sure you can get from Textile Exchange or us or Sustainable Furnishings Council. So we'd encourage your questions, but also further research on those sites, or you can just call us up. We love to jabber about this stuff.
Great. Thank you, Patty. Back to you, Karla. Looks like, let's do this unmute here. Yeah.
Great. Actually, it's very interesting because at Textile Exchange, we believe that there's 5 steps to preferred fiber strategy, and it sounds like Patty and her sister in their company have created just that. So what are the 5 steps are, what are the fibers the company should focus on, how to integrate those fibers into your collection, what are the availability of those. Patty was talking about bast fibers, and you mentioned some things like pineapple and things like that, which are, maybe great, have a good environmental footprint, but I'm not sure how much of that you can get your hands on. So those things all affect, how you create your strategy. And then, what are the plans to communicating these efforts? I mean, Patty just invited everybody to call her and learn more about that. And then I think this is really important, and this is one of the things that the Textile Exchange also does, and what are the certifications that are appropriate to the products that you're using? So if you're using a natural fiber and you want it to be organic, you have to make those claims, you have to certify it. That's actually one thing that Textile Exchange does do. They create standards. They created organic cotton standards. We've just released a recycled down standard, again, something that would be used in home furnishings in terms of fillings and that type of thing. We also have a standard called the GRS, the Global Recycled Standard. So those things are, it's really interesting that Patty, through her work, has sort of naturally gone through and created their own preferred fiber strategy.
Yeah, that is great to see. It's really affirming that those 5 steps you have identified are a natural set of 5 steps. One of the things, Karla, that I think you could probably address for us is, why does a company need to have a sustainability plan? Patty talked about how she realized how making careful choices in textiles has such a big impact because of the water inputs, the chemical inputs, etc. But perhaps, Karla, you could talk about why a company needs a sustainability plan.
Absolutely. It goes back to that, if it's not measured, if you don't measure something, you don't know where you are in regards to your impacts. And so a company needs to outline exactly, make targets, make a plan, be able to provide the resources, the investment into being able to execute on that plan, and then be able to take a look and see whether or not they're making progress towards that plan. It was very interesting. I was looking at some work that one of the members of Textile Exchange had done. And one of the things that they were saying is many of our companies have a sustainable preferred fibers plan where they've got target dates, whether it's 2015 or 2020. But that does more than just tell the people internally that, okay, we're shooting at this goal, but it also tells their supply chain. If a company has a plan to have 100% preferred fibers, or say bast fibers in their collection by a specific date, it tells a supply chain, hey, if I want to do business with this company, I'm going to be able to have to provide that particular product. And I think it just to take a step back is a company needs to have a preferred fiber strategy, but they also need to have a sustainability plan, and that sustainability plan is for the whole company, and it would encompass more than just the fiber aspect of it. Patty talked about a triple bottom line. I'm sure that her company looks at more than just the impacts of their fiber, but their marketing, their greenhouse gases, just that the company is causing. What is the use of paper? So how do they interact with their community? So there are other things to look at if you're just looking at an overall plan as well.
And I jump in here and I'd like to clarify for people, it's important it's very important to look at fibers, but it's very important to look at each step of the fabric production process. It's an amazing engineering feat, human engineering feat, the production of fabric. And there's fiber preparation, spinning, dyeing, printing, finishing. There's lots of subcategories under each one, but it's an amazing process. And there's lots of water and lots of chemicals that are used in the process. And we really try to, well, all of our, not all of our fabrics, but our goal is to have all of our fabrics, the end fabric, be GOTS certified, the Global Organic Textile Standard. And the countries of India and Pakistan have made a commitment to this in sheeting, so you can find it in sheeting. And the point I want to make is that it's very important to understand the difference between an organic T-shirt and a GOTS certified final T-shirt, because it's like applesauce. If you start out with organic apples, but then you make applesauce by adding red dye #2 and stabilizers and preservatives, and you don't come up with organic applesauce. And the same is true of fabric. You want to make sure the end fabric that you bring into your home doesn't contain residual chemicals that you'd sort of rather not bring into your home, and that even if that's not the case, because among certifications, you know, GOTS is hard to find, except GOTS is quite hard to find. But you can find Ecotex, O-E-K-O-T-E-X. Am I spelling it right? O-E-K-O-T-E-X.
Yes.
Ocotex 100. And that's an assurance that the fabric is safe for use, for an infant to suck on, presumably, but it doesn't assure that each step of the production process has been attended to in water treatment. But, you know, it's a good start. We've actually dialed back, and because of price considerations, are offering just Ocotex 100 fabrics and not always GOTS. Because GOTS is very expensive, and it's a big issue. But we wanted, as a company, to be completely transparent with our consumers. One of the things we found very difficult when we started the business was just to get answers. There's, it is a very complicated issue, and we found that intentional and very unintentional sins of greenwashing. The sins of greenwashing were committed, and it was just very frustrating for us. So we wanted to be a place where we're not chemists, but we wanted to be very assiduous in trying to figure out what the issues, the environmental issues with fabric were, and to learn together and share together.
Patty's just set me up again. And you know, she's gone out and she's done a tremendous amount of work. Textile Exchange created what's called the material snapshots. And you can go to textileexchange.org and you can actually download the organic cotton material snapshot for free. And then you, if you're interested, you can get others. But what a material snapshot looks at is all the things that Patty talked about. So they talk about the process of getting the fiber to a particular place. So they'll talk about, for organic cotton, they'll talk about seed, farming, harvesting, ginning, and where it goes. And then they talk about all the impacts. So where do they get the feedstocks? One issue that can happen with organic cotton is there is a need to have good organic seed availability. What is the process for growing? What are the sustainability attributes of that particular fiber? Then what happens, what are the impacts in terms of land use, water use, waste? How is it affecting biodiversity? What chemistry impacts are there? So there can be chemistry impacts on land, there can be chemistry impacts on humans. Is there any toxicity? The energy use. In cotton, organic cotton, animal welfare is not one of the issues, but it is one of the issues that's covered on all of the material snapshots. And then what's the ethical, social issues? Because as Patty had pointed out, you know, as a triple bottom line company, we want to make sure that farmers are being treated well, that there aren't people within the textile supply chain, so just from fiber to a finished garment, that people throughout that aspect are treated humanely and that there aren't any issues. So there is more steps in the supply chain, I think, than many people realize. And one of the things that I'm glad to see is that more and more people are becoming aware of the necessity for transparency and for understanding these things. Textile Exchange developed the material snapshots because our members let us know that these were questions that they had and they needed that support. So that's one way that we create educational materials for the marketplace.
Great. Karla, let me ask you, does your information about materials include information about finishing materials? For instance, I was talking with somebody about the chemicals they need to put on a fabric to make it wrinkle resistant because it's going to go on a sofa and people are going to sit on it. So, we were having the conversation because the chemical, they wanted to have a replacement to the chemical they were currently using, and they didn't know a good idea. Can I send them to you?
Sure, you can send them. You can send them to Textile Exchange, and Textile Exchange has also done something called the chemical snapshots. And again, especially in your business, you understand that people are putting things like acrylic backings on them. They want something to be stain resistant. Stain resistance, I'm sure, as you all know, has some huge impacts and also a tremendous amount of concern out in the marketplace today. And so we created chemical snapshots very much like the material snapshots, except they focus on a particular group of chemicals and how they interact with textiles, what the processes are that gets used, and then also, too, where it's available, we actually suggest alternatives.
Great, great. I am so glad to know about that, and I know our audience is, too.
Can I also jump in and say, we have a blog that we're going to start. My sister primarily writes the blog, but we talk about many issues in fabrics, including stain resistance, and how to learn to love stains, which is really the status of that issue in our estimation right now. But as soon as we have our table of contents updated, Leanne's and our work can be a resource for people too.
Great, great. I'm glad to hear that. We had a wonderful presentation last fall by Jonathan Chapman, who is an industrial designer based in England. And one of the things we talked about was designing for the use a product will have. And one of the things that he showed was a jacquard woven fabric that was enhanced by spills on it. It was designed to look better when the colors changed. It was very, very cool. I continue to think good design can save the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, Patty, we've got a question for you. What is your blog? Tell us the blog address.
Oh, it's just www.oecotextiles.com, OECO textiles with an S.com, and you'll see the link to the blog.
Okay, good. Oecotextiles.com. That's OECOTEXTILES.com. And it is important that we spell it because there is that confusion with O Ecotex, which is spelled with a K in it, which is a very important textile certification. Karla, I bet you could speak a minute to and Patty touched on this, but the distinct certifications. In our conversations, we find ourselves mentioning GOTS and O Ecotex all the time, and the distinction between O Ecotex 100 and 1000.
Well, GOTS, there's the Global Organic Textile Standard, and that's really you can certify different segments of your organic supply chain. You can go all the way through and have a GOTS certified finished product, which I think is a very important distinction. Patty was talking about that because many certifications will only certify the fiber was grown by the National Organic Program. Anything in the United States that's considered organic needs to be grown by the NLP Standard. And then it can be certified by a GOTS, by Organic Exchange Standard. Ocotex, on the other hand, is really the Ocotex 100 standard is something akin to an RSL, a restricted substance list, where there is a number of restricted substances. They've gone around the world and they've looked at all of the restricted substances in all of the countries around the world. They've taken the most stringent standards and they've created Ocotex 100. So anything that is Ocotex 100 certified means that it meets global standards for any restricted substance. And then the Ocotex 1000, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're moving more towards something called Ocotex Step. And Ocotex Step is much more akin to something like a GOTS certification, although probably even a little bit more intense, where they're looking at the entire supply chain and they're looking at impacts throughout the entire supply chain. And that was just launched, I think, maybe 18 months ago. It's not all that long ago.
Yeah.
So it's relatively new.
Yeah. Thank you. I was actually there at an announcement about it, and I forgot. I forgot about its name. So good. Thank you very much for that. And we've been talking in other conversations earlier today about life cycle. So that is one of those standards that does pay attention to the entire life cycle. I would like to see if there are any questions in the boardroom now. Are there any questions in the boardroom? And I would like to be sure that anyone who is sending in questions from the air, I'd like to be sure those questions get to me. I think that there is a technical difficulty to my getting the questions that might be coming in from Google or Twitter. So I will ask another question. Given that this is such a chemically intensive industry, I think it's a place, I hope it's a place, where there is a lot of development work being done in making use of green chemistry alternatives. And Karla, you mentioned that you all have the chemical snapshots list and that you do list alternatives. Can you say some areas in which the textile industry has gone furthest in finding good green chemistry alternatives to maybe more noxious chemicals we were using earlier?
There's something, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, called the Green Chemistry Council. There are companies that have worked very hard to develop chemical processes that have less impact, take less time, require less water, can be done at lower temperatures. So there's a tremendous amount of work being done in those arenas. And then there are simply things where certain chemistries are being banned. Most, we're talking about stain repellencies. Quite frankly, there was a voluntary ban by the major producers of fluorocarbons, which is what's required for stain release products. At that point in time, everybody was using C8 chemistry. Pretty much most companies, not all, but most companies now have moved to C6 chemistries. All of the companies that were part of the manufacturers have C6 chemistry available, which actually came before the actual requirement, which is 2015, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think now there are organizations that are trying to move that even further to ban potentially all fluorocarbons, C6 included.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the things you have to really be careful of, though, is this, I forget the chemical term for it, but unfortunate substitutions. Because there was a move from C8 to C7 chemistry, and C7 was really ballyhooed, and it turned out to be an unfortunate substitution. So the same thing's happening with with phthalate. Everyone is talking about BPA, but that chemical, the substitute, and Leanne did the work on this, so I'm going to forget the alternatives, but the alternatives are looking like they're equally unfortunate as C7, C8. So really, I think one of the powers in the market that will move us to more benign solutions is education among consumers. So I really think events like this and people educating themselves will continue to be important.
I couldn't agree more with you, Patty, about education being critically important. And what I would add to that is that I think collaboration among organizations who are working on more sustainable alternatives is a big part of that. Because, as you said, you've done a huge amount of work and you've created a lot of knowledge for yourself and your company. but there are organizations that have the chemists on staff or that work and coordinate with that, with people who have that chemical background, so that we are able to get and share this information across platforms, across industries, and I'd like to see more and more of that happening, so that Textile Exchange and the Sustainable Furnishings Council, there are several organizations. We work with other nonprofits as well in this space.
Yeah. We're just a teeny tiny company, and we have done nothing except learn and implement what others have discovered. So, and we try to learn, we try to condense in digestible packets, and actually our website isn't too good on that right now. We're going to do a complete overhaul to be rolled out in the early fall, but because there just is so much information, and maybe we don't have to. We should just, for the most part, turn people over to Textile Exchange on materials. But
well, we have a couple of questions that I bet both of you could respond to. One question is about the NLP standard. Can you tell us what the NLP standard is? It's a fairly new one.
I'm not familiar with the NLP standard.
Okay.
Can you tell us what it stands for?
I am going to try to, but we will. So we will hold that question for a moment, and we will address the other question that has come in. And the other question that has come in is about handmaids, and then we have a third question we'll move to in the boardroom. So about handmaids, specifically, Susan of KN Interiors in Mexico is watching and says, handwoven and embroidery by Mayan Indians is a sustainable textile. It is indeed. And I myself have a long background in working with artisans, especially textile artisans, in producing lots of sustainable handmaids. But there are ways in which handmaids are sometimes fairly chemically intensive too. But I was working with women in Nepal who were hand spinning the nettle fibers that they harvested, and they redded it in a completely easy on the environment process. So it is done, and it is often done in very remote places, such as the middle altitudes of the Himalaya, which is where that nettle grows. Do you have some good stories of sustainable handmaids in the mainstream?
In the main, I think for products, for fashion-related products that are being sold in stores like 10,000 Villages, is it? That's a good outlet. Handmade tends to be well, we're working with a group actually in Nepal and a group in India on handmaids, and it's for a particular segment of the market, and not so much always, not every interior designer, and not large volume companies. But I think there's a huge market for it, and it's absolutely, there's always pros and cons. As Karla said, there's no such thing as a perfectly sustainable fabric or product, but the pluses of handwovens are wonderful if it's just empowerment for women and the other that usually dominate.
And it frequently needs much less finishing, so much less chemical use in the finishing. And for us in the home furnishings industry, it means you've got a significant story to tell with the product. And that's something that we know that consumers respond to, is the story of the product. So it does give you a significant story.
And I do want to say something about the standard question, if I could go back to that.
Yes, and it's the NSF standard that I think this...
oh, the National Foundation?
Yeah, the NSF 336, I think, must be what the
well, I would love to comment on that standard because although that standard, I was on a subcommittee of that standard, and I
so
think...
you can tell us what it is to start with.
It's supposed to be a guide to sustainability for fabrics. The National Science Foundation led a process that was initiated by U.S. industry, mills and spinners and others, to come up with a certification, a standard for sustainability in textiles. And I think that that we should look to other standards for stronger guidelines. This was a standard that companies can use to take a few teeny green steps, and that's good. You know, everybody's got to start somewhere, but it's not a very strict standard.
One of the things that I've learned over the years through some of the groups that I've engaged with is that, especially at this point in time, it's just like Patty said, you have to work using solid scientific information that's already been developed. Reinventing the wheel at this stage of the game takes too many resources. For instance, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition created the HIG MSI. That HIG MSI came out of work that Nike had done, came out of work that the OIA, which is the Outdoor Industry Association, had done. These organizations are all working together to create as much common knowledge as possible. And then these things are available and out in the open market. At Textile Exchange, we just did a preferred fibers report. And in that report, we used the HIG MSI index for one of the tools that we used to decide what fibers we would look at, as well as Made by Standard, which is a standard that's used frequently in the EU. So I think that there are some great tools out there, and I think Patty was right to say let's look at what things are done rather than reinventing the wheel on occasion.
Great. I know we've got some questions in the boardroom.
Yeah, hi, my name is Magruder from Fabrics.
You have to talk to the microphone.
Hi, yes. I have a part question, part comment. The NSF 336 is actually an ANSI standard that is now being studied by BIFMA and by the Association of Contract Textiles. I don't think it's outdated at all. I think it's timely. That's number one. Number two, in terms of the fluorine comments that we made before, the industry has moved from C8 to C6. Right now, that is voluntary. We've done that. We're also looking at C4, and we're looking at fluorine-free chemistry. So I think that's evolutionary process. And in terms of fiber selection, there's a lot of different ways of getting to sustainability. I think polyester, and I'm not touting that because it's not all we use, but we do use some. There's post-consumer polyester that you have a hard time arguing with the sustainability of that. It's going from water bottles into filament fibers. It's a really strong story. One of the worst chemistry violations I've ever seen in my lifetime is mercerized cotton. The process was an awful chemistry bath, and so I think it's really hard to just make a general statement about individual fibers. I think that there's an evolution of fibers that has happened over the last 10 years, and I think that that's continuing to happen now. And I think where we're going to be 5 years from now is a hell of a lot different than where we are today. I know there was a question in there somewhere.
I couldn't agree with you more. Certainly, if you look at the Hague MSI, if you look at Textile Exchange's material snapshots, they cover things like recycled cotton, recycled nylon, linen, silk, wool, recycled cotton. So there's a very wide variety of fibers that one needs to look at when they're talking about preferred fibers. Certainly it's not any one particular fiber. And even within the cotton framework, you can look at anything from an organic fiber to a BCI fiber to a cotton made in Africa. I've got a list here that's you know, several cotton strong, recycled cotton. So again, it goes back to what are the needs for your company. You know, none of these products, part of the sustainability attributes have to go, you have to look in the end at what's the price, what's the performance, what's the quality, and how is that going to work to for your company.
Yeah, and I'm not demonizing any particular fiber other than, well, but I will take issue with your saying there's nothing wrong with turning bottles into fabric. I mean, 85% of all ethylene glycol is a feedstock for polyester production, and the recapitulation of the toxic production events in recycling is an issue. You know, there are just a lot of issues. Antimony needs to be removed from as a catalyst in polyester. We have the Great Pacific Gyre horrendous problem. We have the fact that polyester and all of the synthetics never go away. I mean, there is issue after issue after issue with synthetics. Now,
I remember saying that there was nothing wrong with it. I was just trying to say I think you were painting this with a pretty wide brush. That's all.
I think what I was trying to say is there's a framework, and there's a framework of, we use 6 or 8 categories, and we try to understand the issues of a fiber and the entire production process within that framework. And there's lots of pluses and minuses. You know, it's definitely a decision. It's hard to generalize about good or bad.
One of the things that I think that's important to understand is when we were writing the Preferred Fibers report, one of the things that I made a very strong point of is the fact that of all the fibers used in the world today, the preponderance of them, I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, 60-something%, are synthetic fibers. And if that's the case, I think it's incumbent on us to do the best we can with those synthetic fibers as humanly possible. They aren't perfect. Nothing is perfect. So I certainly support the idea of recycling those. the truth is that today, a very small percentage of those bottles are actually being recycled, more than in the past. But the more that happens, the better position that we're in. And one of the things that I've learned in this industry is that it depends is usually a correct answer because everything depends on far more things than we ever anticipate.
Except maybe with vinyl.
We have another question in the boardroom.
Yeah, I have a question to ask Susan. It's Dale Reed from the SSA. First, a technical question. Karla, is Textile Exchange the same thing that was Organic Exchange and issued the OE 100 standard? I'm just curious.
Yes, absolutely. And what happened was, I believe it's in 2010, the organization recognized that the work that they did on bringing organic cotton to market was valuable and useful for other types of fibers as well. So they became the Textile Exchange, and now we include other textile fibers besides cotton, and also even other cottons besides organic cotton in the materials that we work with.
Okay, so my question from a broader perspective that would affect manufacturers and retailers, let's say, is can you address, and you touched on it, the difference between organic and sustainable? There's a lot of confusion in the minds of consumers and actually people who have to sell product, and they may not be necessarily synonymous. I mean, when you look at energy issues and the total impact on the earth, while organic may be a very healthy standard, it isn't necessarily the same, right? I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
The problem with some of the terms that we use today is that they're not specific. So, and I'm sure some of you have run into this where people will tell you, well, isn't cotton organic? It's an organic material, right? But when we use organic to say that a product is an organic cotton, typically what we're saying is that it meets what's called the National Organic Program standard. So there are very specific standards to that. It means that the land that it's grown on has been chemical-free for a minimum of 3 years, that there are no synthetic fertilizers and pesticides used, and there are no genetically modified ingredients within that product. On top of that, then to ensure that your product has been grown by those standards, there are certifications that you can get for those products. When you use the term sustainability, that's actually a loaded term because people use things very loosely. And so there isn't a formal definition in one sense when you put sustainable, say that a textile is sustainable. There isn't a formal definition. And for good communication, you have to create, you have to use your terms carefully and then create a definition that you and the people that you're talking to agree upon. That's why when we started this and I talked about preferred fibers, I talked about what the definition from a textile exchange perspective is of a preferred fiber. So I would caution you on the use of the word sustainable when you're talking about your textiles. I think it's much more important that you state what you need. The FTC a couple of years ago went in and revised their green guide for specifically those reasons, because people were getting a little loosey-goose with what they were calling green. And I think Patty mentioned earlier the whole issue with the whole greenwashing, which hasn't stopped.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Karla. I am realizing that it's time for us to complete this conversation because we have another one starting in just a minute. So thank you very much, Karla and Patty, for your expertise. Thank you, everyone, for your questions and comments. Please do continue to send questions and comments, but send them through our website and we will respond to them as we can. I also want to thank our sponsors for this series of conversations conversations, including World Wildlife Fund and Belfort Furniture and Norison and Levico and McCreary Modern, Crescent Fine Furnishings, New York Now Artisan Resource, Room and Board, Vaughn Bassett, Home Trends and Design, Surya, and Naturepedic. Thank you, everybody, for being involved with us in this important work. Our next conversation will start at the top of the hour and is about wellness in the interior environment. So it follows right on the things we've been talking about. Thank you for being part of this conversation. Please be part of that one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great.